2018, Terrence Woods was a 27-year-old filmmaker slash journalist who had, ever since graduating college, traveled the world, filming in locations that are very rugged and sometimes quite dangerous for these documentaries and TV shows that he was known to work on. In October of that year, Terrence was going to travel to Idaho with a production company called Raw TV. They were doing a TV series around an abandoned gold mine called the Penman Mine. Penman Mine was located in an area that is quite rugged in the middle of the backcountry. Terrence had previously worked on two different backcountry shoots. One was done in Turkey and the other was done in Alaska. So he wasn't an expert by any means, but he was accustomed to being out in the wilderness to do some of these shoots. Prior to leaving for the trip, he had texted a number of his friends and just said he wasn't really that excited about going on the trip. His friends would later say to investigators that his language was not alarming. He was just kind of complaining about not wanting to go on a particular work trip, so it didn't stand out to them at all. Terrence arrives in Idaho in early October. He texts his father to let him know that he's landed, he's made it to the hotel. Everything seems to be going normally. He was supposed to be there until mid-November, and that's what everybody in his circle was expecting. So on October 5th, when Terrence sent a text to his father that just said, "I'm going to be coming home on October 10th," and there was no explanation, his father wondered why. And so he wrote a response and said, "Why are you cutting your trip short?" But he never got a response because Terrence had actually already left for the day on October 5th to go do a shoot at this mine, and he'd be out of cell phone reception. On October 5th, the crew that was around Terrence all day reported that he was acting very strangely. He was very quiet, withdrawn, wasn't really talking to anybody. And at the end of the day, when they were wrapping up shooting, one of the producers was sitting in a vehicle waiting for everyone to kind of finish up, packing up, and Terrence said he wanted to go relieve himself. And he walked over to the edge of this cliff, and for whatever reason, this producer, he didn't know why, but he just thought he needed to look to see if Terrence was okay. And he turns to look where Terrence was standing at the edge of this cliff, and Terrence isn't there anymore, and he sees Terrence's radio is now sitting on the ground, standing there. And there was just something about the scene that he saw that he instinctively knew something's wrong, and he actually ran up the cliff in case Terrence had fallen off of it. But when he got to the edge of the cliff and looked over, he was shocked to see that Terrence was down there, about 15 feet down, but wasn't laying on the ground like he had fallen. He was sprinting down the hill, not saying a word, not looking up, running at full speed down the hill into the forest. The producer didn't know what to do. He kind of yelled to some other people and said, "Hey, what's Terrence doing?" No one knew. And so the producer and somebody else also began chasing after Terrence. But after a little while, they couldn't catch up to him, and they were worried that by chasing after him, they might scare him. And so instead, they immediately go and they call authorities, and this huge search is launched for Terrence. So for a week, you have all these people looking for Terrence. You have people on foot, you have dog teams, you have a helicopter with infrared technology. You have all these people combing this area, and there's no sign of Terrence. One of the search and rescue officers commented that it would have been so hard to get away from this search because the ground inside of that forest was so covered with fallen trees that there were times where you were just walking on fallen trees. You weren't even touching the ground. And so the idea that Terrence could run in there and effectively evade this massive search that had kind of encircled the area, it just didn't make any sense, but there was just no trace of him. And to this day, we have no idea where he went. There's never been a sign of what happened to Terrence. He just started running away for reasons we don't understand and disappeared. On the same day that Terrence Woods goes missing, 56 miles away in the same mountain range, a 76-year-old woman named Connie Johnson also goes missing under very strange circumstances. Connie was an outdoors woman through and through. She had previously worked as a wilderness ranger for the U.S. Forest Service, and she was known to take young people out on trips along the backcountry and teach them how to survive. Her friends said that she had tremendous survival skills and spent much of her time alone in the woods. Connie was working as a camp cook for Ritchie Outfitters. It was a company that organized hunting trips in the Idaho and Montana backcountry. The camp that she was actually working at was not accessible by vehicle. You had to get there on foot or on horseback. On October 2nd, all of the hunters at the Ritchie Outfitters camp that she was working in left for a 3-day hunting trip. They said bye to her and bye to her dog Ace, and they were gone. She was the only person at the camp. The following day, they got a very strange radio transmission from Connie. They couldn't understand what she was saying. They couldn't tell if she was mumbling or if there was something wrong, or maybe it could have been the radio. But when no one could understand what she was saying, they ultimately said, okay, I'm sure she's fine. And so a couple days go by, and on October 5th, the hunting party returns to the cabin, and Connie's gone, as well as her dog Ace. They're both gone. All they could find was Connie's jacket was laying over her gun that was sitting on a picnic table. That was it. A very intense search was launched that included the National Guard, the Air Force, helicopters, dog teams, ground searchers. They couldn't find her or her dog. And so on October 16th, they called off the search. 3 weeks later, Ace, her dog, would show up 15 miles away from where they had gone missing. The dog was emaciated, but was okay. They fed the dog, and then they tried to get the dog to help them find Connie, but to no avail. To this day, we have no idea where Connie went or why she left the camp to begin with. In February of 2008, the Pilkington family, which was David and Camilla, along with their two sons, Timothy and William, who was 7 years old, were on vacation on the west coast of Vancouver Island. They were staying in this tiny little town called Tofino, which was at the end of one of the peninsulas on the island. There was maybe 20 streets in the town. There was only a handful of places that you could stay. Everybody knew everybody on the island. I mean, it was really a tiny place. One morning, David wakes up early and decides he wants to take both of his sons down to one of Tofino's beaches. And so he gets Timothy and William, they walk over and they go down this flight of steps that leads down onto the beach itself. And when they get to the bottom of the steps, William says he wants to stay at the foot of the stairs. Timothy wants to go actually walk around the beach with David. And so David couldn't convince William to come with him and with Timothy. And so he says, okay, William, you stay right here. I'm gonna go with Timothy for a couple of minutes and walk around the beach. So David and Timothy walked only about 10 or 15 meters away from William, who was just standing at the foot of the stairs, just watching his dad and his brother. And at some point, David would say that he turned his back on his son. He said it was maybe for a minute, and he was looking at Timothy and they were doing whatever they were doing. And then when he turned around, William wasn't there anymore. And so David instinctively runs over because there's nobody else down there. There's nowhere really for him to have gone. But he runs over, he's looking on the sides of the stairs. He can't find his son. You know, he's looking where he could have gone, and it only made sense for him to probably go up the stairs. It wouldn't have been long enough for him to get into the water. It had only been about a minute he had turned his back. And so he goes up the stairs, he's looking around, he can't find his son. And this huge search is launched for this boy because this just happened. It's a very small area. They figure they can find this kid. The main area they were gonna look was inside of the forest. Tofino had a very dense forest right in the middle of it. And since the beach butted up against the forest, they figured that the boy could have walked up the stairs and made it into the forest in that 1 minute that his father's back was turned. And so after an exhaustive search of this forest and there's no sign of him, unfortunately investigators began to look to the beach and were waiting for a body to wash up on shore, because historically the only people that ever went missing in Tofino were either found in the forest or they washed up on the beach. Those are the only two places you can go. There isn't anywhere else you can go. But the boy never washed up on a beach, and they never found a shred of evidence ever in the forest where that boy was. He just vanished. So unfortunately, like basically all of the missing 411 cases, you have a baffling set of circumstances with no clear resolution. We don't know what happened to these people, and we probably never will. But that doesn't stop us from theorizing about what could have happened. So I'd love to hear in the comments, and I'll get back to as many of you as I possibly can. If you want to learn more about Missing 411, I do have a playlist just called Missing 411. Or what I would suggest is going right to the source. Check out David Paulides and his book series called Missing 411. I provided links below of how to get his books. I've also provided his YouTube channel in the description as well. So please go check out David Paulides and his team at Can-Am Missing Project. They're amazing, and it's why we have any of this information to begin with. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, I would ask you to politely take an M67 frag grenade, pull the pin, and gently lob it towards the like button. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. If you have a story suggestion, we have a subreddit just called Mr. Ballin. It's linked in the description below. I check it every single day, and if I intentionally use your story suggestion, I will absolutely credit you. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram. My username is JohnBallin416. I also just started a Twitter account where my handle is also JohnBallin416. I'm also very active on TikTok where my handle is Mr. Ballin. So whether I see you on Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, or here on YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, guys, that's gonna do it. See ya. Every year, hundreds of people go missing inside of national parks and forests all over North America. Of those hundreds, there's always a few that baffle investigators because either they go missing under very strange circumstances, like they were right in front of someone, they were talking to someone, and then, in a second they're gone, or where they're discovered doesn't make any sense, that they've covered a distance that is too far for them to have covered, or they're in locations that are just physically impossible to get to. One man is making it his mission to research these very strange disappearances. His name is David Paulides. He's a former police detective. He covers all of these cases in his book series called Missing 411. I went out and bought all of them. They're incredible. He has a YouTube channel called the Can-Am Missing Project. That's linked below in the description. And so today I'm going to share 3 missing person cases that have all been covered by David Paulides in Missing 411. And hopefully by the end of this video, you're just as interested in the Missing 411 phenomenon light. And hopefully you'll go over to his channel, the Can-Am Missing Project, and you'll give them a follow because he has poured tens of thousands of hours into this. Without David Paulides, there would be no Missing 411 project, and many people that go missing would just be forgotten about. So shout out to David Paulides for keeping their memories alive and keeping the public engaged in something that is truly baffling and needs more attention. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. If that's of interest to you, then please sneak into the like button's house and replace all of their salt shakers with sugar. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. So just a couple of weeks ago, early on July 24th, 2020, an 18-year-old woman named Gia Fuda, who was living with her parents in Seattle, Washington, wakes up in their home, goes downstairs, says good morning to her mother and to her father. She has a sip of a seltzer water, and then she heads out to her car and says, okay, I'll see you tonight, and she drives off. Gia's mother said that because of the quarantine, all of Gia's college classes had been moved online, and Gia didn't like doing all of her work in the house. She felt trapped. And so her routine consisted of getting up early and heading to Bellevue College, which is just outside of Seattle, where she could do some work in their library, do her online courses there, and then come back sometime in the evening. And so Gia's parents assumed that's what she was doing that day. But when Gia left that morning, she did not follow her typical COVID-19 routine of going to Bellevue College to do schoolwork. Instead, she hopped on the highway and she drove 60 miles to a very rural part of Washington state. It's very heavily forested. It's called Index, Washington. And she gets picked up on a camera inside of a coffee shop where she gets a cup of coffee and she buys a Bigfoot keychain and then gets back in her car and drives another 30